talking about it is really hard. So the first time that I ever heard the term husband stitch was actually at a lunch gathering, and when I was in high school, my mom took me to like this high school reunion group at some restaurant, and a friend of hers had joked about asking the doctor to give her a husband stitch after she had her baby. And she joked about it and everyone laughed, and I had never heard that term, so I was kind of confused. And I thought it even sounded gross, but I was like, okay. And later on I went home and I did some research and I was like, okay, that's weird. But it was something that people commonly joked about, which I guess kind of shows the problem with society that, you know, we have. But it really started off with husbands requesting to doctors an extra stitch when sewing up after performing an episiotomy in order to tighten up the opening of the vaginal canal. I guess that area where they've cut, they'll go up further and actually add, you know, extra stitches. I was 20 years old and this is my first baby. So when I went into birth, I actually did have an epidural. And so that helped relieve any pain that I was having. So I had mentioned that I wanted to do everything to avoid an episiotomy. I knew that natural tearing was actually better from what I've heard. I know that sometimes women can tear very, very badly. But from what I've always heard is that just allowing your body to do what it's naturally going to do is the best thing. And so that's what I would have loved to have done, but it just wasn't what happened. My daughter, actually, her birth was a little bit traumatic. When she was delivered, she didn't breathe at first. She was kind of blue, and I was freaking out, and one of the nurses grabbed her, took her to like this table where they have a lamp that's kind of like a heating lamp, and they were tickling her and she finally cried. That was like, thank God. But another thing that happened was when the afterbirth was coming out, the actual like umbilical cord ruptured, and it was like a horror film, like blood splattered across the room. It was very crazy. And then that's when he was like, I'm gonna stitch you up. And so he completed the stitches, and then when he was finally done, you know, he took off his gloves and he looks over at my husband, or my partner at the time, and he's like shaking his hand and he's like, hey, good luck, or have fun. Those were the words, was have fun. I think he kind of like even did like a wink, and at the time it didn't really click like what had just happened. But then later on, the story was retold to me, and I was like, okay, it did happen. I wasn't the only one that saw that. So that was the last thing he did, and then he said, have fun. And I don't know, I think what he did had to have been intentional, especially with that comment. I know a lot of people are probably going to comment on this story and ask why I don't report him or why I don't sue him, and I do feel like I have some responsibility, and that's why I'm talking about it, because talking about it is really hard. But you know, I just want to raise awareness. I feel like people need to know that this is happening, and people need to know that they need to ask their doctors the right questions. You need to be sure that your doctor is a good person. So the doctor that was actually supposed to deliver my baby for me, she was at another hospital at the time, which was down the street, but she wasn't available. So her practicing doctor that is like her partner in practice, he was at the hospital covering for her, and he came in to deliver my baby. And he was actually the doctor who had delivered me when I was born. And when I saw him, you know, I thought that was a good sign, like it was meant to be somehow. And everything just happened so quickly. My daughter came out so quickly. He was like, okay, it's time to push. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna need to do an episiotomy. And that's it. He didn't ask if it was okay. He just said it, and he grabbed a scalpel and he did it. And that was pretty much it. I didn't think that there was anything wrong until weeks later. I took care of myself. I rested, I healed, just making sure that I was keeping myself clean and doing everything I could to heal, taking care of my baby. As a first-time mom, I didn't even know that anything was wrong or anything had happened to me. About, I'd say, 6 months or so after I had my daughter, I started, getting back to regular life. I started using menstrual cups again and things like that. And I remember before I had my daughter, my menstrual cup was super easy to use and I had never had issues using them. And after I had my daughter, it was the most painful experience taking it out. I mean, excruciating. And I didn't understand why it was so painful. And I had to order the smallest size possible that I could find. And even that was incredibly painful to remove and insert. So I had to stop using them. But even regular tampons were too much. Over time, my body has relaxed and I've learned how to be able to use tampons again. But I want to say 3 or 4 years before I was ever able to use those kinds of products again. The doctor you choose is a very important decision, and it's important to find a doctor who will respect you, your wishes, your birth plan, all of that. And you really are putting so much in this doctor's hands. And if your doctor doesn't really care about you or thinks that performing something like a husband stitch is morally okay, then that's probably the doctor you don't want for yourself. I am seen. Are you?